Welcome to my talk. Welcome back up 2018, second afternoon. Hopefully you're all awake-ish. If not, the warm room and the comfy seats will take care of that. My name's Darren Wallace. I'm an app consultant for Multifactor, previously Amsys. I'm sure some of you read what's happened, but if not, check the Move blog, you'll find out what's happening in that sort of area. Some background on me. I've been working with Apple products for over 12 years. Started out as a hardware repair trainee back in the day. Old iMac G4s, G5s. Anyone remember those? Probably not old enough for some people. I'm now in my current role as an Apple consultant, and for the last year or two, I've also helped out with the London Apple Admins meetups. With, I think we're all represented here. Sweet. Multifactor, we're a sort of professional services support and an MSP company. Provide aspect support to some clients. And you can find me on most places, Slack, Twitter, etc. Darren Wallace. Feel free to connect me. Sweet. So, in case some of you don't know, it's my first conference talk, so sorry in advance for the number of ums and ahs. I'll try and keep it to a minimum. Hopefully we'll get around to that. So, my actual talk. Over the summer, I worked with a customer on increasing their level of security IT for their IT solutions, really. In this session, I'll be looking to cover some of the changes I faced, including the more human aspects I came across, as well as the techie bits and pieces too. Some general points before we go. Slides will be available after the conference. Currently on the Multifactor page in about 5 minutes, there'll be a blog post up, hopefully, if all goes well. If not, they'll also be on the MapDuck pages somewhere. Any questions? Please hold them to the end. If we do run out of time for Q&A, shouldn't do, but if we do, feel free to grab me afterwards, or via Slack, Twitter, email, whatever. And last point, there's a few URLs throughout the post, or throughout the talk. Don't worry about jotting them down. At the very end, there's a link to the blog that'll have all the URLs talked about, maybe a few extras, so don't worry about that. Firstly, the agenda. So, I'm going to go over the goals and the targets we had for the project. I'm going to go over a rough plan for implementing the changes to meet those goals. Nothing ever survives contact with the enemy, so we've got some snags, both the human and the technical ones, so we'll go through those. Lessons learned, so we're going to take some of those snags, all those kind of previous points, and turn them into kind of some tips and tricks I could pass on to people and hope that'd be helpful, and kind of the point of the talk, I guess. And then kind of going forward, what next steps would be for this customer, and possibly in general. So right, the goals. Anyone tell me what teams might be playing?
Argentina? Red team, white team.
Arsenal.
Ghana and...
Let's go. Right, so before we start the work, we need to find out what our actual goals would be. It's quite a, as you saw the subtitle of the talk, it's quite a generic phrase that you chucked around and taken to mean different things. So we need to get some more definitive goals in mind. And without any goals set, how do we know whether we're going in the right direction? How do we know when we're kind of done, if you like? So yeah, it was helpful. The easiest way to kind of work that out is to step back and say, well, what are we trying to protect against in the realms of IT security for a company this size? Perhaps doing a disservice or doing wrong by customers or employees. The voice was scratched. It wasn't just in my head, was it? This one companies can struggle with because it's more of a moral choice rather than necessarily a sort of prohibitory choice, unless you get caught out doing something that might be questionable, then there's other implications. In addition to that, don't forget companies will host data not just on customers or businesses, but on their employees, i.e. folks, as well. Could be your home address, could be your phone number, your email addresses, could be your personal bank details, HR things, pay, things like that. That all kind of comes with that sort of umbrella that you kind of maybe not want your colleague finding out that you might be on a bit more than them. Or they might be getting more holiday than you, etc. Or nastier things. What about being hacked? This tends to be more a case of when, not if. So it's kind of going to happen. Is there nothing you can do to perhaps reduce the risk? Is there nothing you can do to better handle the risks or the results of that? What about being sued or fined? This one tends to be quite an obvious one for a company because it costs them money, the bottom line, your wages as well. It's normally a result of non-compliance with sort of industry regulations, such as in finance, or government regulations, such as the GDPR in the UK and the EU. Everyone ready for May 25th? A lot of people had lots of work to do for that. A lot of people still doing lots of work. Maybe it's about to start it, hopefully. What about being infected? This one does kind of overlap the being hacked aspect. It tends to potentially more directly cause downtime, say with services going offline, ransomware, etc. Or perhaps indirectly, where you've got to take services and devices offline in order to cleanse them. And obviously, taking things offline means business downtime, which is money lost. So, kind of matters, really. Now we've got our baseline ideas, we just kind of define what areas we're going to work with. In this particular case, we split the targets into 3 areas. So our client devices, in this case, was Mac OS, laptops, desktops, etc. These are all currently in use, so things like wiping and redeploying them weren't an option, so I have to take that into consideration. Cloud-hosted services, Office 365, Dropbox, GitHub, Slack, amongst a few others. End users, people like you and me. The technical ability of these users would range dramatically from very technical, like presumably most people here, through to kind of okay. Tends to be more the younger generation, people used to games consoles, tablets, phones, etc. Right down to maybe practically zero technical knowledge. You kind of chuck them at a customer, chuck them at an Excel spreadsheet, and everyone rings around you, but maybe they'd struggle with things like checking email or changing in how they access a system. I do try and make a point to be extra helpful to those kind of users, because at the end of the day, swap role reversal, I probably wouldn't do anywhere near as good as they would in their roles, so it's only fair to kind of treat them the same way. Right, that's our targets defined, and our sort of high-level baseline of what we're aiming for. What about the plan? There's Sean on the sheet. How are we going to meet our baselines with our targets? So for the end devices, we didn't want to completely lock down users. After all, they're adults, they're employees, they're not a bunch of children at school who have to be there. In this spirit, we're only kind of looking to enforce what we felt was a minimum baseline to meet those options, really, those requirements. So roughly, as far as the plan for client devices, we were looking at a management solution. Being a Jamf partner and integrator, we went for Jamf Pro, but some sort of management solution that could report back details and allow us to enforce bits and pieces. Full disk encryption on all laptops. Firewall, because why the hell not? It's built to the OS, it's free, so it's the cheapest option, least likely to have issues with updates. So it kind of made sense. Local password policies on all devices. As per the more recent advice from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, we wanted to stay away from that whole change of password every 90 days thing as well, just to make a note on that. Unless there's obviously a reason why we feel they should be resetting passwords, suspected compromises, things like that. Otherwise, they just tend to change the last number to another number, all that jazz. And lastly, software patch policies and deadlines with those. We're going to look into cover things like applications as well as the OS itself. There's no point having things running around that unpatched with known vulnerabilities. So for cloud-based services, we wanted to do as much as we can, since they would probably be public-facing by their nature. Again, password policies where possible, pretty much the same as for the end devices. Multifactor authentication on all services that would take it. Ideally, you wanted to go for app-based, but falling back to SMS if there was really no choice. Requiring the use of non-shared accounts. So that allows us to be able to track who's doing what, to be able to control, including revoking access, should someone leave or change a role, and help to comply with regulations a bit better. And lastly, kind of ties into this, changing the administration passwords. So a lot of those shared accounts were administrators for a certain service, so there's no point giving everyone their own account, them still knowing the admin password to get around everything. So we'd change that, we'd perhaps have the technical director change that himself or herself, and maybe have a sort of break glass in an emergency scenario where perhaps the MD also knows or has access to those details, but not the normal staff. And a plan for the end users. We were looking to write share and discuss an official company IT security policy document. So that would include things we would require of the employees, suggestions and recommendations. You can always take that a step further, as well as your fair sort of non-work usage policies for work equipment. It would also detail what items would be enforced by the management solution and what will be on the employee to carry out or enforce themselves. Discussions around password use, including password reuse across various systems, and maybe the use of a password manager. I know personally I'm quite a fan of one password, but obviously many other solutions there. Documentation, one of my favourite words. Everyone hates doing it, but it's a good thing. We'd look to create documentation for everything that might affect them as part of the project, such as introduction of multi-factor authentication, how they might use that, how an enforcement of firewall would look to the end user, how would enforcing a password policy would look to the end user. This will be sent out to staff members, made available in internal HR systems, as well as discussed in person, should that felt to be needed. And then rollouts. So the changes were planned to be staggered department by department over the course of a few months. This would provide a chance for staff to opt into the change early, before it became compulsory. Hopefully they'll provide us feedback, we can tweak the solution, kind of a improvement ongoing. Right, so we've got our high-level goals, we've got our plan. How'd it go? I wanted an excuse to chuck that in. My favourite gift. Obviously, we hit snags. You always do. Nothing ever goes according to plan exactly. We'll go through the technical ones first, then we'll maybe look at, or we will look at the more human aspects. So the first snag we hit was with configuration profiles and their lack of precision or surgicalness. For example, if you want to set only a single item in a profile payload sort of section, you've got to set all the options in various tabs and buttons and drop boxes and whatever within that GUI interface. Specific example was the required use of firewall, again for laptop users. However, see the three tabs up top, the other three tabs? It also would set and enforce all settings, unless you want to manually change them, disabling the password after screensaver requirement, third from the bottom, which is not default outbox behaviour, it's the opposite. Disabling the firewall, if the user turned it on, also stop them from turning it on. Allowing sending of diagnostic data. Might have been an issue for a lot of people, might be a big issue for a lot of places. I'm going to caveat with saying that's the default, so if you didn't go and change them, that's what you get stuck with. For this specific snag, I ended up building a custom profile, which I've documented on the AMSys post at the top there. That one is only for pre-1013. Rich, who happens to be in the audience, thankfully, has a nice one on 1013 onwards. So you're only managing specific settings you need for firewall key redirection, that kind of stuff. A little bit of honesty, this isn't just a Jamf issue. Other third-party MDM providers, including Apple's reference solution, Profile Manager, has the same issue. Eric Gomez discussed it in more detail in a presentation he did at MacBrain, San Francisco. Link there, about 30 minutes in. 30 minutes, 12 seconds in. That kind of details it a bit more, and across a couple of different vendors, a couple of options he was using, a nice little graph to show you how much of an issue this can be. Again, a reminder, these will be on the link at the very end, so don't worry about jotting these ones down as we go through. Second snag I hit was with local password policies in macOS. So we were using a password policy delivered from the passcode profile payload, a lot of P's in that. But that policy, or that profile, does not check against existing passwords. Kind of annoying. In hindsight, it's a little obvious. It would require the OS to have sort of reversible passwords stored that you could then reverse on the fly. Not really ideal. But however, we had to make sure that not only were we pushing these policies down, they were being applied to respective accounts that were already in use. Turns out I wasn't the only one with this issue. It's come up a little bit over the last few years, and the solution is basically to expire the local account password. So next time they log in, they're forced to create a new one. Thanks to Graham Gilbert, who verified I wasn't being an idiot, and that is the case. It's been a while ago. Another tip as well, we didn't really want to punish users who might already have what we might consider a appropriately secure password. So by not requiring they have a different password to the last one, they could just reuse the same password in the new password request boxes. just meant we were trying to keep disruption to a minimum for this client. Multi-factor authentication. That was an interesting one. Not going to lie, this is me whinging, standard. But as it's my talk, I get to whinge. So, some cloud services don't offer multi-factor authentication. Sucks. 2018, it sucks. Some offer multi-factor authentication, but it's not enforceable by the administrator. So it's an optional thing, which is a bit annoying. Some do offer that, but it's a higher tier service. They have to pay more money to get that functionality. Not always an option, depending on what the requirements are around the tool you're using. Some are just weird. I've had more than one provider for this project where you would go to set up multi-factor as an administrator, and what it do is it chuck the QR code at you and ask you to set it up right then and there for that user. Great, so I'm going to have to, as an administrator, go to each user, sit down with them, log in as an administrator account to set up their two-factor in that session, which is just crazy. Patching devices, the last sort of technical snag worth mentioning as part of this. As an external IT support company, we want to ensure the clients are as patched as possible, which makes sense. However, as an external entity, tying a user's desktop or laptop up at inconvenient times can end up with us getting chucked out the door. If they're in the middle of a big important meeting and we end up going, we need to restart your machine, have that. We're not going to make a lot of friends that way. Same concern applies for internal IT, to your internal users. It's a good way to get called up to a manager to find out what the hell you've done. We're still working on various bits and pieces for this, including the options of doing it and just going ahead with it. Maybe switching it to some sort of system where if they fail to do it by a certain point, we're going to do it. Give them a bit more fair notice. Or perhaps more hands-off. As an external entity, maybe we, once a month, will collect a list of people who missed the patching cycle or not running within that cycle, take it to their management or their supervisor or our on-site contact or whatever to then chase it up internally or carry out whatever internal procedures they need to. Right, human element now, the human side of snags. Hold on, a good one. Technical knowledge. So, one thing we underestimated was the technical knowledge of some of the employees. Like all of us here, living and breathing 40 hours a week or more, it's easy to forget the typical levels of technical knowledge of an average user. Some might have no idea what multi-factor is, let alone what us enforcing that will mean to them. Again, this is something that is mostly tricky to blame on users. Put me in front of Sage in Photoshop, I can click some buttons, make some smiley face, whatever. Couldn't use it in a day-to-day job without a hell of a lot of retraining. So it's only fair to kind of not necessarily put that same sort of requirement on your normal Joe Blob users, your accountant, for example, to a degree. Personal technology. So this particular company didn't issue company devices to their employees. One of the things we wanted to do is roll out Multifactor, which ideally needs an app-based token. They weren't quite ready for the more job key style ones for this, unfortunately. But yeah, one thing we found is not everyone has a smartphone. I mean, again, it's 2018. It's 2018. How are they going to get on their Facebook and their Twitter? It's crazy. In this particular instance, we set the user up with SMS-based for that particular user as a sort of exception, if you like. It's better than nothing. And the company were, I can't remember if they've actually done it yet or not, hopefully they have. They were going to provide that user with a specific work device to take that role. Employee leave. That was a fun one. Essentially, something you might not consider when you've got your eyes straight down on technical problems and trying to solve them is setting deadlines and when things need to be done by, is the people actually working. Over the course of this project, we had a couple of people on long-term sick, we had others on maternity and paternity leave, and one lucky so-and-so was on a 4-week honeymoon, right in the middle. Right for some. It didn't cause a large number of issues to that rollout, so we kind of adjusted timelines and extended certain areas, but it's something you kind of maybe overlook when you're too much constrained on the technical side of things. Documentation. Yeah, it's the second time it's in here now. In some cases, the documentation wasn't read or wasn't fully understood. Being a technical person who's created tons of documentation for other technical people, it's a very easy trap to fall into. In various places, the documentation used sort of too much unnecessary technical language, it was too long, or just didn't have enough screenshots. Simple things, really. And in some cases, we had intentionally disruptive snags, or impairing, which is a polite term. We had some users refuse to read the documentation at all, in any way, shape or form. We had a kind of more passive-aggressive refusal, where we would send emails saying, look, hey, we need you to have a look at this, can you jump on this, give us some feedback before we roll it out, and they would just ignore it, over and over again. We even had people push back on the last day of a rollout, typically in combination with the first two. Fun. It's always nice when people kind of push back that hard for just because they can't bother. Being an external company, it made it a bit more tricky. We had to tread very carefully. We went as far as moving deadlines, making temporary exceptions, and ensuring that any communications around deadlines and requests, perhaps we'd CC in their manager or our main contact, or both, kind of to make sure that it's like, hey everyone, we're trying to contact this person, they're not listening, let's keep going up. The bottom line really for this project was we did have full backing of the board of directors for the company, and that was always kind of our ace in our pocket, should we really need to play it. It's not nice, and it's never fun to go down that route, but it was always our kind of reserve if you really needed it. Right, enough whinging, more or less. Lessons learned. After all that, what did we learn? What advice and tips could I suggest now after that project? I'm not going to say miracle cure either. The eating your own dog food concept. This is something I quite like the sound of, and it was actually another customer who got me onto that particular phrase to mean it, to explain it. Essentially, if you're rolling out these changes to your organisation, you, and possibly your team, should be the first to have these changes. You should also continue having those changes in place once you kind of roll it out to users. All the same changes you can expect to give to your users, you should be also trialling. If you can't do your job with those changes in place, it's probably likely your users probably can't either. If you're rolling this out to another company, say for example where we were, it's good to try these changes out on yourself and run with them as well. Perhaps then also deploy them out to the client management, the client's management teams, the people who are going to be the bosses of the people who are going to have these changes. Again, if they find them annoying or impossible to do their job, you're going to cause problems going further along. Count number 3, documentation. Yeah. Documentation should be written for the intended audience. Sounds obvious. Your documentation is aimed at end users, write it for end users. If the process is complicated, consider adding in more screenshots, maybe adding in some annotations, detailed step-by-step instructions, make it really simple. If the documentation is long, consider breaking it up in a better way, maybe either into sections or perhaps into separate documents. If it's not confidential, why not try and have the members of your team before you give it to the end users or the customer? Hell, why not even your family? I've tested plenty of generic user documents on random family members to see if it holds up. My other half, my mum hates me. But I've got some good feedback. Stuff that just, for me, it was like really obvious that I didn't pick up on because I made too many assumptions. Staggered or staged rollouts. Roll out those changes slowly. Don't just hit the whole company with one big change. Not just for technical reasons, but to test how it goes down with users and how it's going to affect workflows that you might not be aware of. Ideally, I like to test with the most and the least technical person in each various department or area of the business, because they'll be the ones that tend to say, that makes sense, that doesn't make sense. I said, do you want a cup of tea? Not, do you want to break my neck? That kind of stuff. You also want to use this as a way to test your documentation of these changes, and it gives you a chance to amend them, tweak them, improve them, fine-tune them before you roll it out to across the board. Get appropriate support and approval. Make sure you've got the right backing for these changes that you're implementing. For example, as I said before, we had full backing from the board of directors of the company before we rolled out the changes. We made sure to notify them, deadlines and time frames, things like that, as well as the risks for each change and the risk of not making those changes, and kind of allowed them to make the final call, so we then have their backing. It's also allowed us to push harder if we need to get these changes onto devices. Be nice. Some changes are going to be really disruptive to users. They're really going to break workflows and cause problems. Try and be understanding. Try and be flexible where you can. Imagine if I locked down Slack on your Mac. I don't know about you lot, but it certainly affected my work output. You could argue either way, but yeah, it would be annoying, and I would appreciate some sort of reasons why, maybe alternatives, things like that. Don't be too nice. You're going to encounter users, and even senior staff, who are going to push back, either through malice, or just perhaps ignorance, or just desire to not be disrupted. Sometimes you're going to have to force these changes through, regardless. For example, some of the early phases, we requested volunteers to test out changes for these areas of business, pilot users. After pushing back deadlines for this particular department over and over and over again, we chatted with the relevant director, sent out a final deadline communication, and just did it. We were satisfied we tested sufficiently with other areas that it wasn't going to cause any problems, but at the end of the day, we had to get this stuff done. Be realistic. If you're in charge of the changes that you're looking to roll out, you can go crazy locking down things, controlling things, and really kind of sandboxing a machine. Make sure what you're doing is appropriate. That's probably a better way of putting that. For example, this particular client, we knew that some of the users, some of the staff members would go on Facebook and YouTube during breaks. Rather than saying to them, no, and explicitly forbid it, we then had a whole other problem with then trying to be HR/technically blocking things and all that kind of stuff. We permitted access to those sort of things under various conditions, including just don't do it when you're meant to be working. Lunch breaks is fine, go for it. Don't do it if it's going to actually absolutely destroy our bandwidth for that particular office. Kind of a bit more common sense around it. Don't do it if there's one machine that 2 or 3 people need to use and you're sitting there watching videos, cat videos on YouTube, and other people go to work. Kind of be a bit more understanding, kind of a bit more give and take, probably a better way as well of putting that. And finally, don't go it alone. If you're stuck, don't forget there's a community of specialists, some of who already had the same issues you're going through, or the same challenges. You've got the Mac Admin Slack instance, completely free, fully boots. Your conferences, networking. You've got local meetups, such as our own London Apple Admins. Rock up, ask questions, check out Cry for Help and see who can maybe offer some advice. It's worth doing. So, go back to the future. Look into the future. What might be the next things we were considering to implement next for this customer? Firmware passwords should be relatively easy to deploy, just adds another layer to the security model for those devices. Unified authentication system, perhaps something like SAML or SSO, maybe a cloud LDAP provider. A central location that would mean that when a new user starts, we add them into 1 or 2 groups and they get access to whatever services they need. Or when they leave, we don't have to have a checklist of things we need to kick them out of. We can just deactivate their account in one place. Very good, particularly if users are changing roles or if they might be leaving under unfriendly circumstances, shall we say. Better data collection, collecting more logs, events-based alerts, that kind of thing, both for cloud services and or client devices. Something like Central, that kind of stuff. Maybe even looking at sort of intrusion detection around that data, as well as keeping it for historic reasons in the event of something should happen, it should happen. Documentation, yeah, more of that. Maybe look at fully documenting their user onboarding process and offboarding process. Nothing user likes more than turn up on day 1, and to wait another couple of days for the device to turn up, then maybe still not having access to all the systems they need. Or, again, worst case is, user gets kicked out the door, we need to lock down their access as quickly as possible. We need to make sure we've got a decent offboarding document, so we're not going to leave ourselves open, or leave them open. More aggressive on the patching side of things. Perhaps forcing the latest macOS upgrade onto user devices, maybe around New Year, 0.1 release. High Sierra kind of screwed that a bit, but those tend to be a bit safer releases. I subscribe to the belief that Apple only fully patch everything on the latest macOS, regardless of releasing security patches for older OSs. Even if that's not the case, look at Meltdown. Meltdown wasn't patched on the 2 last releases beyond High Sierra for like at least a week, maybe a couple of weeks. and the whole time you're kind of left vulnerable. And that's just the stuff that makes the kind of gets headline news. And lastly, spend more time with departments and the users. Maybe sitting with them, discussing their workflows, how they use their devices. Might highlight areas you miss. Maybe they're using a new cloud service that you're not aware of that needs to be included. Maybe they're doing some really weird thing that you can go, well, tell you what, give me 5 minutes, we'll knock up the script, we'll knock up another solution, we'll change a few buttons here and there. Bang, you've now made them more efficient, working better, working happier. Just something else to add to that list. Right, I'm done complaining. Your post should be up now, hopefully. If not, I'll be running out the door to sort that out shortly. Any Q&A?